Okay, so let's go. So just a quick overview, and then that'll be enough from me. We'll hand it over to Dave for the goods. But first, we're just going to cover some basics. Talks about the different types of crowdfunding campaigns. Obviously not a comprehensive list, but then we'll talk about choosing your platform depending on the type of campaign you want to run. Then get into building your campaign. Talk about some just basic things to keep in mind when you're getting started. Walk you through some of the things to get going on. We'll have a question period around then. Talk about incentives and rewards, of course, a key and oft talked about component of crowdfunding. And then we will talk about getting the word out, promotion, maximizing the success of your campaign. And finally, some tips for once the campaign has wrapped up, kind of assessing your performance, making sure you're tying up all your loose ends and everything. There we go. Dave, thank you so much for joining us. Enough from me. How are you, the team at Bandzoogle, holding up through this? So what's going on in your collective world?
We're good, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. We've been trying to do this for months, as you mentioned, and figured might as well keep this going because crowdfunding is I wouldn't say especially relevant, but it's still relevant even during the pandemic, and we'll get into that. But Bandzoogle's good, man. We're 17-year-old music tech company that's been remote since day one. So in terms of operating as a business and a platform remotely, that's always been the way we've done things. It obviously has changed things for many of my coworkers who have kids at home and no daycare, no school. So a lot of juggling going on, but everyone is safe and healthy, thankfully, and we're putting all of our efforts into releasing new features and putting out a ton of free content to try to help musicians through the pandemic. And some of the links to the content we've created are in that PDF you shared at the top. So we appreciate you guys including those resources. So yeah, we're good, man. Happy to be here, and I hope everyone tuning in is also safe and healthy and doing all right.
Love it. Okay, yeah, let's jump into it here. Now, these are pretty basic. I think I'll just walk through them, and then we'll hand it over to Dave when it comes to choosing your platform. And that'll give us an opportunity to just highlight how Bandzoogle, again, being a tool specifically catered towards musicians, how those services, I guess, stack up or compare to your other options. But as far as types of campaigns, again, there's a lot of overlap here, but just generally speaking, we see a lot of project-based campaigns. So band or artists looking to raise funds for either an album creation. In some cases, it's for tour support, other things that go on in musicians' world where they're asking for funding ahead of time. A lot of times it's kind of the pre-order model where the incentives or rewards will be whatever the product or project is that you're funding. Circumstance-based I have in there. We've been seeing those a lot, particularly from our friends in the US for some obvious reasons. But, if there's an accident, someone's health is compromised, stuff stolen from the van. Dave's coming at us from Montreal, kind of notorious for tour theft. That's another one you might see pretty frequently. And then one that's really been emerging more recently through, particularly through services like Patreon, is the more open-ended kind of subscription-based quote unquote campaign. Groups like Stars have been doing this lately, Jesse Cook, but essentially where you are having your fans as patrons, where they're providing a certain amount of money per month for access to various perks, exclusive content, etc. That's more of an ongoing thing. So then, having said all of that, when it comes to choosing your platform, Dave, I'll hand it over to you here. Maybe you can just start with give us an idea of Bandzoogle's crowdfunding platform and just where it fits into the mix here, what it's particularly effective for, etc.
Sure, yeah, and I should also mention off the top that Bandzoogle also has built-in fan subscriptions, so it's that monthly ongoing kind of online fan club thing. And again, it's where Bandzoogle differs because we're a paid service to build your website, and we include all these other tools with that. We don't take any commission from revenues. So anything, you sell your music, sell merch, sell tickets. We just launched tickets to live streams. So you can sell tickets for live streaming shows now, commission free. Crowdfunding, all the pledges are commission free, and the monthly subscriptions are also commission free. So that's, right off the top, that's the biggest differentiator with Bandzoogle, with all the other platforms, which I'll get into as well. Because you are paying a monthly fee to Bandzoogle to host your website and build out your website and do a bunch of other things. We're not taking any cut of those sales. So so there's no commission on the pledges for crowdfunding through Bandzoogle. The other big difference is that you get paid immediately. So crowdfunding platforms take the money from the fans, and they take the pledges from the fans, but they don't charge the fans until the campaign is over. So with Bandzoogle, it's a pre-sale. You're using the store feature, the music feature, so you're getting the money right away. Bandzoogle doesn't get involved in that transaction, so it goes straight from the fans' bank account or credit card directly to the artist's bank account, or through Stripe and PayPal. So they're just the Stripe and PayPal fees, which are pretty standard, 2.9% plus 30 cents per transaction. You'll see that all the platforms, add that on to the percentage that they take. Obviously, flexible funding. There's no, Kickstarter, for example, which is the best known crowdfunding platform. You have to, when you set a financial goal, you have to reach it to get the money. Whereas Indiegogo, it's flexible. GoFundMe is flexible. Obviously, with Bandzoogle, it's flexible. There's no set goal there. And one key differentiator for Bandzoogle when it comes to musicians and bands is that all the sales for your crowdfunding campaign are treated as pre-orders. So on our Pro plan, we do SoundScan reporting. So the day that your album comes out, those sales are reported to SoundScan, which is important to some musicians, some artists, some labels. That was the big advantage that Pledge Music had back when Pledge Music was popular in the crowdfunding space. That's how they found their niche, because the Indiegogos and Kickstarters of the world obviously don't do SoundScan reporting. So you're selling all these albums and these pre-orders, but they're not counting towards Billboard charts, if that's important to your campaign. So that's one thing that Bandzoogle does have that generic platforms don't. So like I said, Kickstarter is probably the best known, of course. It's an all or nothing. So if you reach your goal, you get the money. If you miss your target, you get nothing. So there's a higher risk there. There is a greater sense of urgency because you really do have to reach that goal. They take 5% of all the money that comes in, plus 3% processing fees, plus 20%. 3% processing fee plus 20 cents per pledge. You're not able to pause campaigns, so if it's not going well, but you can cancel it and relaunch if you see things aren't working. And I dug up some interesting stats of how you can kind of tell if your campaign has a good chance of making it. And you get paid at the end of the campaign. So after the campaign is over, Kickstarter pays you. Indiegogo is slightly different. They take the same percentage, 5% plus 2.9% plus 30 cents per transaction. But it's flexible funding, or you can have flexible funding. So that means that you set a goal. If you don't reach it, you still get the money. And again, you get paid after the campaign ends. The other big one is GoFundMe. It's more for what you mentioned, like the accident theft. It's generally not used for like the project-based stuff, like albums, touring, things like that. It's more, gear got stolen, or there was a fire in the studio or whatever. There's something more tragic kind of happened. For GoFundMe, they actually don't take any percentage. They make their money through the people donating. You're able to add a percentage onto that to give to GoFundMe to help them stay afloat. So no percentage taken, but they do have the 2.9% plus 30 cents per transaction. It's flexible funding, obviously, and there's no time limit to campaigns, and you can withdraw the money anytime on GoFundMe. So that's where they differ. But again, if you're looking at crowdfund an album, GoFundMe's probably not the place you want to go.
Okay, fair enough. For other considerations here, I was wondering, and just heard some anecdotal evidence that differs a bit, but like to use a platform, I guess, like Kickstarter, like one that's very well known, kind of ubiquitous in that space, where some people think that that might give them an edge in terms of discoverability, that like you might have traffic happen upon your campaign on top of the promotion that you're doing. Have you heard stories about like artists kind of lucking out in that regard? I remember someone telling me this was kind of in the infancy of crowdfunding for music projects, but that like within 24 hours, just because of where their campaign was positioned on Kickstarter, like they just saw it skyrocket from funders, some of whom like were well outside of their network.
Yeah, I had also heard those stories, but again, the key thing you said was early days. When crowdfunding was a bit of a novelty and kind of new, people were like actively, and there weren't as many campaigns at the time. I would say now, for Kickstarter and Indiegogo, if you're a musician crowdfunding an album or tour, once we're all able to get back on the road touring, it's highly unlikely that you're going to get contributors that are outside of your network through those platforms. If you're like a tech startup or you have like a interesting gadget or product, maybe it might go viral through their platforms. But in terms of musicians, it's unlikely. And that's one thing that, again, a lot of people knew Pledge Music when they were around. Very unfortunate how things played out with that company. But what they were able to do as a music-focused company is recommend similar artists to their database of fans and pledgers, and they claimed that they were contributing about 15% on top of the artist networks to contribute. But they're not around anymore. And it's not something Bandzoogle does or is going to do. We're very hands off in terms of that. So to answer your question, I would say it's highly unlikely, and I would not count on it going in. If you get any extra contributors from using a specific platform, it's a great bonus, but definitely don't work it into the budget.
Bingo. Thank you. Let's see. Okay, so getting started, and I guess these are just some things to keep in mind before pencil meets page or finger meets keyboard. But I guess first and foremost, have fun with it. Like crowdfunding is cool because you are directly interacting with your network of people that have told you that they are fans of your work in most cases. There's going to be a lot of content creation involved. From the outside looking in, it seems like a cool thing to take off. And again, especially now that we have a lot of time on our hands, I guess it double-edged sword that a lot of people are hurting right now and people's dollars are stretched out. But, where there's challenges, there's always opportunity. And then, yeah, the idea of your fans wanting to support you and the fact that as they do, you get insight into your fans, your fan base, specific, general, anything else that people should be keeping in mind or knowing that Bandzoogle has rolled out some resources to help people get started with crowdfunding. Anything else that you're advising people to do sort of at the outset of their campaign?
I would even take a couple of steps back, and it's actually a good thing we're having this conversation now. For anyone tuning in to this webinar, even though we're all holed up and self-isolating, to properly plan out a crowdfunding campaign, you need a good 3 to 6 months leadway. So that takes us into late summer, fall, which hopefully things have settled a little bit more in the world by then. But so just to give you a sense of time frame, like you can't just launch a crowdfunding campaign tomorrow without any planning involved. It takes a long time to build out your campaign, build out the story, create the content, plan out the content for your mailing list, for your social media, your video, your blog, all those things. You want to have as much of that planned out as possible. And the very first thing to keep in mind is that it's kind of a cliche term in the crowdfunding world, but it's called crowdfunding. So if you don't have a crowd, it's probably going to fall flat. So if you don't have a fan base, and there are different philosophies on how to measure that. So, when evaluating whether an artist is ready for a crowdfunding campaign, you would look at your email database, your mailing list database, your socials, but not only your social numbers, but your social engagement, which is more important. You can have 20,000 likes on Facebook, but if whenever you post something, you get 2 likes, you don't have a very engaged fan base. But if you have 1,000 likes and you're getting hundreds of engagements per post, that's much better. So if you don't have, you know, I'll throw a number out there, like 1,000 mailing list members is probably a solid base to be able to launch a crowdfunding campaign. You have 1,000 emails of fans that you can go to get support. And if you don't have that yet, then you should probably take a step back and use this time, use the next 6 to 12 months and just focus on engagement and trying to build up your mailing list and build that community up before you even get to the getting started part. Sorry, I kind of went backwards there for a second, but I just wanted to give people a sense of the timeline for running a crowdfunding campaign can be quite lengthy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, appreciate it. And that serves a question that I will put forward in promo about the difference in effectiveness between a mailing list that you've compiled yourself versus your social media audience versus any other avenues you have for promotion. We will tee that up momentarily. So yeah, let's get into building the campaign here, right along the line of having fun with it, I suppose, with everything that you're doing. And this leaves crowdfunding, but touches on a lot of the same things we're talking about: imagery, your voice on social media, like everything that you're putting out there on behalf of or to represent you or your band. This is no different. Like, be yourself. Make sure that everything you're doing as part of the campaign aligns with the image, the attitude, whatever it is that kind of composes the core of your artistic identity. And then within that, very important to be telling a story, to be engaging people, whatever your campaign is. Again, whether it's project-based, whether it's, you know, an accident, something circumstantial. Yeah, I guess the place to start is with a story. And part of that we find, and maybe Dave can weigh in here, is that, yeah, multimedia is king, particularly video. If you can do something creative that's compelling, that makes very clear what your mission is, you're off to a great start. Yeah, you want to pick it up there, Dave, maybe using some examples of stuff you've seen on Bandzoogle, but just, yeah, really effective storytelling, effective positioning on campaigns that you've seen that have been particularly successful.
Yeah, quick shameless plug for the Bandzoogle blogging. We put out tons of content every week, and today actually, and I timed it this way because it was relevant to where my thought process was recently, but in preparing for this webinar. But we put up a new blog post today just about building your community for a crowdfunding campaign, and you know, there's a tidbit in there about telling your story, and you really got to let fans know kind of where you're coming from, where you're at right now, and where you want to go, and kind of create an emotional connection with them to help you through this journey of creating this, you know, this new album, if that's the case, which is typically what it is. And so, you know, that can take many forms, like you said, like imagery, updates on socials, through all your communications that has to shine through. But video obviously is a huge component to a crowdfunding campaign, and it should be front and center on your crowdfunding page, and it is on those platforms like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. It's one of the things that they get you to do. And campaigns that have personal videos that are kind of pitching the campaign raise 105% more than those that don't have a video. And so it's super important to make that visual connection with people who are considering contributing to your campaign. And it's one thing I want to be sure to point out is it's not just a video of you asking for money. Like, crowdfunding campaigns that fall flat are generally the ones where the artist is just focusing on what they need. And like, obviously you need money. That's fair enough. But what you really need to focus on, again, is that journey, your story, where you're coming from, where you want to go, and what's in it for the fans. Like, what are they going to get by being part of that creative journey with you? What kind of incentives? What are the rewards? You know, focus on that, and then ask them, like, hey, be part of this with me, kind of thing, instead of just a straight up ask for money. So those videos, you know, most of the advice out there is keep them pretty short and sweet, around 2 or 3 minutes. Make sure they're good audio, video quality, which most musicians are comfortable with, especially now in the age of live streaming. So just making it pretty good quality, personal feel, speak directly to your fans, be yourself, be authentic, and focus on your journey and the benefits that your fans are going to get by, hopping on board that journey with you.
Bang on. Yeah, here's a big one, and I guess this is kind of subjective, although maybe it isn't, because it seems to be pretty widely shared advice. But as far as communicating your planning, and specifically, I don't know, I've always been, I shouldn't say that. Yeah, been more prone to give when people, the artist going for the funding is just very clear, like line items. Here's my project. Here is what I want to do. Here's how much each of those things is going to cost. And in a lot of cases, as though you're, filling out a grant application, you can get quotes for all this stuff. Protest the Hero, Canadian metal band, probably about 5 years ago now or so, but like at the time they had, I think, like a record-breaking Indiegogo campaign. They were asking for 100 and some K and ended up raising, I think, 3 times that. But they had their budget just like right there. Here's how much the studio is going to cost. We don't have a drummer right now, so we're going to fly up this guy because he's awesome. He's a guy from another band, so they're kind of appealing to their fans at the same time. But it's here's how much everything's going to cost. And then that ties in beautifully with your incentives that, like, here's what we're doing with your money. Here's what you're getting for it. And so, yeah, people like to be charitable and, support things that they like. But in doing it this way, you're also kind of appealing to their sense of return on investment and transparency and everything. Is that consistent with your personal opinion and what you and your team have found in effectiveness, is just being maybe even overly detailed in where the money's going, how it's being used?
Absolutely. That's exactly right. So the more planning you can do and the more you can show your fans, you're asking your fans to trust you, really. Like, they're going to give you their money, their hard-earned money. They need to know that you're going to put that to use for the goal that you had in mind. So laying out those costs, and really with crowdfunding, like, there's obviously those stories like you mentioned, and there's the Amanda Palmers of the world who raised like over $1 million, and you hear those stories, which is great. But generally speaking, crowdfunding is to break even, like just get the project made. And so you want to detail all those. And I mean, that's cost of recording, production, manufacturing, shipping, the platform fees. If you're using like a Kickstarter, Indiegogo, like you have to factor in all those things into your budget, and then, show how much you need. And so in terms of hard numbers, and to give people a sense, because I know it's kind of hard, like, to know, like, are you ready to crowdfund right now? Do you have the community? And it's obviously different for each unique artist and the fans that they have. But generally speaking, data shows that about 15% of your mailing list, of people on your mailing list, are kind of your super fans. They're the ones who are likely going to contribute to your campaign. And the average spend on crowdfunding platforms is generally about $50 to $60. So if you have 1,000 emails in your mailing list and 15% of those are your super fans, it's 150 times $50. It's about what? That's $7,500. So that can give you an idea of like what the potential is. It's not exact science, but that's a bit of an idea of what it takes to raise, even more money than that. Like $7,500 will pay for some of your stuff, but maybe not everything. So you have to be realistic with your budgeting, depending on the size of your mailing list, the engagement of your fan base on socials and things like that. So that's some data that I found that I thought was really interesting in terms of just measuring before you're even going in to try to figure out what your budget can be.
That makes a lot of sense, and actually leads us in beautifully to the next point here. Wait, that's not the next point. It was my first point in the promotion side. But yeah, I want to pick right up on that about appealing to your super fans, and just knowing that how realistic you are is obviously going to affect your success, but how your success appears, especially early on, like, people are copycats with these things. And so you really need to come out of the gate swinging, and make sure that if your goal is realistic, so that subsequently you can show progress on your way to meeting it, that then will snowball and encourage other people that, okay, this is legit, it's real, people are getting behind it, I can get behind it too, which we'll touch on momentarily. This is our last slide before we get to questions, and our first round of questions anyway. And yeah, one of my favorite parts of crowdfunding, I'd say, the incentives, rewards. People get super creative with this. And again, it comes back to, what do your fans want? You know, in the early days when you were, say, crowdfunding for an album project, there would always be, you know, the digital downloads, and then you'll get the CD or vinyl when it comes out, like standard fare, all well and good. But then you get into really creative stuff that appeals to, well, I guess both kind of reflects who you are as an artist and who your fans are. So really thinking locally and direct on this. Yeah, let's roll into that. And I would love to hear, to start or at any point through this, Dave, but, and I've got a few stocked as well, if anyone in the chat wants to throw some out, but some of the cooler rewards or incentives that you've seen in crowdfunding campaigns that either made you donate or want to donate, or at least just gave you some fodder for when you jumped into this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a couple of things with rewards is it's important to have rewards at kind of all levels, for all levels of fandom. So you're going to have some of your fans are just going to basically do a digital pre-order. And so that's totally cool. Make sure you have that available. And then you can go up from there. There's, you know, the typical stuff like CDs, posters, t-shirts, vinyl, signed items. And I would say that don't overdo it, and like be sure that you can deliver on all these rewards. And for the stuff that's more labor intensive and expensive, you definitely should limit the quantities and make them much more exclusive, because those are going to be your super fans that are going to, you know, want to grab those. But making sure you've got stuff at all levels, ranging from like a $10 pre-order up to even like $1,000 for, you know, producer credit or a custom song or a custom, you know, house concert thing, you know, things that are a lot more exclusive. But we have a Bandzoogle member called Enter the Haggis that they actually wrote, they wrote a great blog post for us that compared, they've done a lot of crowdfunding successfully. They've raised in the 6 figures between Kickstarter, Pledge Music, and Bandzoogle. And so they have a lot of experience with this stuff. And they wrote a nice comparison piece. This is going back years, long before Bandzoogle had crowdfunding. But they had done it just through their store on Bandzoogle and raised over $50,000. But they have like really rabid fans, and they had one exclusive reward I'll never forget, that there was only one available, and it was to get a matching tattoo with the singer that the fan could choose within reason. Like they had to, you know, but it was, I think it was like $2,000 or something like that. But it ended up being a grandmother from Ireland that ended up bidding on it and getting it to help out the band. And so they got matching tattoos, which is hilarious. So that, you know, they know their fan base. They know, you know, they always come up with unique and creative things. So just thinking about your fan base, what kind of quirky, unique things could be, you know, of interest or could get them excited to donate their money. And actually, Brian Buchanan from Enter the Haggis, I was chatting with him recently because they're about to start. They're looking into the subscriptions model basically now that, because they're a touring band, they had all their shows canceled through the summer. So they're finding creative ways to make money through live streaming, and they're looking at subscriptions. But we were chatting about crowdfunding, and he talked about one of the things, I hadn't even thought of this, but in terms of like Kickstarter and Indiegogo and even Pledge Music back in the day, like, you know, you can inspire a fan and they spend the $3,000 on some exclusive reward, but their credit card doesn't get charged until the campaign's over. So they might forget 2 months later. And, you know, you got to make sure that all that money goes through before you, you know, count it in the bank. But yeah, the matching tattoo one is the one that stood out for me for years.
Love that. And it fits into this, like, obviously value doesn't just have to be monetary, but like that is a tip. You know, you see exclusive artwork a lot, which I think is really effective. You're giving your fans something, well, exclusive and unique and in line with your, but as far as like shipping that out, as far as cost of production, Sure, it's your time, but we're just talking about raising cash. That's a low cost, high value reward, exclusivity, something to lean on. Toothbrush. I remember Alexis on Fire. It wasn't even for crowdfunding. I think it was just a merch thing that they did. But early Alexis on Fire, one of the guy's dads is a dentist, and so they like got Alexis on Fire branded gum toothbrushes. And you know, anyone that knows what you can get thousands of those things for dirt cheap. You know what they cost at the store, and ended up being very, very effective for them on the markup. Which again, not crowdfunding, but same principle applies. And that was one I read some horror stories about cost of fulfillment and delivery. Like, you know, if you're saying, yeah, we'll send you out this CD and say you get lucky and have a remarkably successful campaign, like your garage is potentially look like Amazon. And that leads into the delivery timeline. Like, we'll touch on this later for post campaign, but you need to make sure that you're making good on everything and just try to avoid anything that's going to hinder your ability to do that in the best case or worst case scenario of your campaign. So
absolutely. And one of the biggest mistakes that's made is everyone thinks vinyl is cool, which it is. It's awesome. However, people underestimate how much it costs to not only manufacture vinyl, but ship vinyl. Yeah. And so I've read stories of bands that lost money because they sold so many of the vinyl from their crowdfunding campaign, but then they were losing money on each one. And so it kind of ate up any of the, you know, the profits that they had made. So vinyl's a dangerous one. You got to research that one and get all your quotes in order and make sure you know how much shipping to Australia is, just in case someone from Australia contributes to your crowdfunding campaign in Canada.
Right. And then there I've seen, I mean, some cases it seems tacky, but you know, you got to do what you got to do. But on that note, I have seen, you know, shipping within North America only, or if it's like we'll come make dinner for you, it's got to be within a certain distance of a tour stop. So just cast your wide net and cover all of your bases. Okay. Questions. I've got one here. Thanks, Tia and Tommy. And we're talking about a podcast here, but that's not entirely outside of our realm. I mean, here we are amidst COVID-19, and we're encouraging artists to be creative, think outside the box, means to stay productive and be engaging. So if you want to start a podcast, sounds like a hell of an idea. Tia and Tommy are wondering about, if you were looking to raise some funds for a podcast. I mean, some really well-known ones, Canada Land comes to mind, very successful with the Patreon model, although again, they're kind of a really well-established entity at this point. But this could also be something like a temporary campaign, help get us off the ground. Dave, have any of your users thus far used Bandzoogel's integrated crowdfunding for something like this, like something that's music aligned, but not necessarily an album project?
We haven't seen it for crowdfunding specifically because it's more project based. And like you said, like maybe getting the project off the ground, buying the equipment, getting set up, things like that. Building out your website, you know, I can see that. But for what we're seeing on our platform, it's more the subscriptions model. It's the monthly ongoing payments. That podcasts use that model a lot more. And so what you're doing there is you're offering, you know, episodes earlier to your subscribers. You're offering, you know, monthly exclusive Q&As with your listeners or bonus episodes and things like that. So it's a little bit different. And it's because podcasts are an ongoing thing where you're probably releasing one or two or more a month. The subscriptions model lends itself more to that type of project.
Okay, good. What about, and I don't know if anyone's really qualified this, but just how often you can go back to the well? Like, have you come across any wisdom on how frequently or infrequently you can or should be doing crowdfunding, even if we're talking for different applications?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a tough one to answer because it really depends on the fan base of the artist. But I know that, getting back to Enter the Haggis, like they've done 4 crowdfunding campaigns, probably one every couple of years. And so it's usually album based, right? So that every time they have a new album, so it's every year and a half, couple of years. and they're able to pull it off quite successfully. Where it becomes difficult is if you're trying to do the subscriptions model combined with the crowdfunding model. That gets really difficult because you're already going to your super fans asking for monthly payments, and then you're also trying to raise money for a project, and doing both simultaneously is very challenging, and it's difficult to pull off. But in terms of strict crowdfunding, yeah, I would say probably you need to give a year breathing room if I were to gauge it before going back to the well.
Okay.
I definitely wouldn't do it multiple times in the same year. Probably you're going to wear out your fans.
Good advice. And here, someone just asked for a link to the Bansukel blog that you mentioned, which I'm going to throw out in the chat right now. You can hit that up. Oh, it's asking me to moderate myself. Hey, Barry's a step ahead of me. Thanks, Barry. God, we've got a helpful group here. Okay, if anyone's got any other cues here. Oh, there we go. Tanya in just in time. Dave, would you consider doing crowdfunding for a single release? Good question.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen that. I don't think I have, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done or hasn't been done. I think if you're going to do a single, obviously the budget needs to be tempered, and maybe it comes along with like a video budget. So you're doing cost of recording, producing, releasing, and also putting out a video for it. That I can definitely see. But then again, it comes down to, if you're going to do it for one single, how many times can you back to your fans to do that within like 12 months kind of thing? And that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult. Whereas an album, obviously, it's a much larger project. But I'd say maybe if you want to gauge your fan base and just put out a single and do a video along with it, I think that's probably a good idea. And then maybe you wait, 6 to 12 months, and then maybe work on an album project from there. But I haven't seen it. I'm trying to think if I've seen it, but I can definitely see that working for some artists.
Yeah, right on. Okay. My apologies. I only put in half the link there. Went to 404. The full link to how we can get the community around a crowdfunding campaign by Caleb Murphy is now in the chat. All right, so here we go. We've built a campaign, plenty of lead time. We've got a great video story, maybe some video promo. And I guess something to keep in mind too is like, well, we're going to talk about that in a moment. I'm getting ahead of myself. So here we go, launching the campaign. So this is the very beginning. Again, we want to come out swinging, and popular wisdom is you need to establish traction right away. So maybe a little unrock star, but getting your family, your close friends, the super fans, you can lean on, having them rounded up and doing what they can at the beginning is going to make a real impact on your campaign, again, in terms of that snowball effect. And, I'm guilty of this myself, and just, I think everybody is, we want to get in on something that other people are getting in on, and we don't want to get in on something that it looks like other people aren't interested in. So coming out heavy, having a good portion of your total handled off the bat is going to instill confidence, generate interest, compel people to donate. So yeah, I guess what else goes in with that, Dave? Like outside of leaning on your network, making a few phone calls and whatnot. Any other advice on that initial rollout when you're launching your campaign, means of trumpeting the word?
Yeah, it's a great idea and a great concept. And I would even take it a step further that you can preview the campaign to your closest friends, family, and maybe a handful of your really biggest fans, and ask them for feedback. And that's going to make them feel even more invested in the campaign when it launches, because they feel like they've even contributed to the planning of it. So that's, going a step further. But then, opening up the campaign to those people before you make the big announcement is a great idea, because you want to show, like you said, that momentum and show that people are already excited and getting on board. And campaigns that can get 30% of their goal in the first week are far more likely to succeed. So building that initial momentum with, again, like you said, your friends, your family, some of your biggest fans right off the bat is going to give you that momentum to more likely succeed. with your campaign.
Okay. So yeah, I've set up a lot of things earlier that I said we would touch on later, and here's one of them. So yeah, Dave, you were mentioning 1,000 lists on your mail, or sorry, 1,000 contacts on your mailing list as being a good starting point. Yeah, just wondering if you've got any opinion. Like, we're always encouraging people to be building their own mailing lists over and over and over. That does not always get heated. And then, there are a lot of artists that maybe don't have any type of data collection of their own, but very significant followings on, say, Facebook or Instagram. So yeah, on that note of leveraging your whole network, like, do you have an opinion or any hard data on how effective direct mailing or direct email campaigns are towards, say, posting to social media, even if you're boosting, targeting, direct messaging?
Yeah. And this relates to anything that you're doing as an artist. If you're trying to monetize your career, whether it's selling music, selling tickets to shows, selling tickets to live streams, crowdfunding, subscriptions, all that fun stuff, selling merch, email still is, and it sounds so old school, it's 2020, but email is still the most effective way. This is inside and outside the music business. It's still the most effective way to drive revenue. You can spend the money on Facebook and do more targeted ads and more targeted boosts of specific posts, but you're spending money. It's still a very cluttered environment. You're not sure if you're really reaching your fans. Whereas email, if someone gives you their email, they really want to hear from you. Even more importantly, you own that database of fans. So like Bandzoogle has a built-in mailing list tool. If you ever leave Bandzoogle, you download that database, you take it with you, and you use it with MailChimp or whoever. So that's super important up front. That's why it's so valuable, because you can keep that for your entire career. But email converts, and it's, I found varying, different data points, but specific to crowdfunding, it's over 5 times more effective for converting people to donate than social media. So that initial email of telling the story with a clear call to action to contribute, it's a focused thing that's being sent to the inbox of your fans. That is far more likely to result in donations than socials. Socials is still super important, and I don't want to discount that, because that's definitely part of it, and that'll be a big part of it throughout your campaign, which will probably last between 30 to 60 days is kind of the general length of time for a campaign. So you're going to be doing a lot of socials, but you're also going to be sprinkling in these email blasts at the beginning, around the middle, with, if you've hit significant milestones, you want to announce that to your fans through email. And that last 72 hours, another stat about crowdfunding is that 42% of all funds are raised in the first and last 3 days of crowdfunding. So it's that first initial announcement, people get on board, some people don't, and then say they'll get to it, but they forget. And then when you send out that last, the last couple of days, 2-3 days, you're going to want to send those emails and say, hey, this is your last chance to contribute and get involved in this project. So it's pretty telling. Nearly half of all the money raised in crowdfunding comes in the first or last 3 days of a campaign. So using your email is vitally important to driving those pledges.
All right. And in the interest of time, I guess I'll just touch on this one quickly. But for partnerships to reach beyond your bubble, like whether that's a media outlet where maybe you give them some exclusive content, maybe do a live stream through their channel or something in exchange for signal boosting your crowdfunding campaign. It's something you can do with like-minded artists. Maybe if you're planning campaigns years apart, maybe another band or artist might give you access to their network in exchange for the same thing. I mean, yeah, just get creative in spreading this, disseminating word of what you're doing as far and wide as you can. Also, before I jump to this, Justine, you've got a question here about Remo and Sabian. Are they known to put shout outs? Can you give us a bit of clarification? Because I'm interested in what you want to know and want to put it in front of Dave. I just don't have a grasp of what you're after. So yeah, promos are during the campaign. Come out swinging with that rollout. Like Dave said, first 3 days, absolutely critical. Then as things start to go, especially like kind of week 2 or 3, if we're looking at a month-long campaign, you could really use a boost to get some up the hill a little bit better. Yeah, just some general ideas here, Dave. I would love to hear if you've got anything to add, but one that I came across is to constantly be giving updates, maybe not too constantly, but on your progress, not just with the campaign, like, oh, we've raised this much so far. People can see that, but are you in the studio? What have you been doing? Have you had a chance to put any of this money, whether or not it actually exists in your account yet, to work? Yeah, and then that'll lead us into, with whatever you're doing, the message can't always be, hey, I need money for this. There's other ways, whether it's maybe acoustic performances, videos, just to keep energy going. Yeah, any particularly successful initiatives on that side that you've seen thus far, Dave?
Yeah, all the things you mentioned for sure. Just updating, whether it's the songwriting process, whether you're in studio, all that stuff is great. You can go live, do Q&As, updating your fans on how things are going. One thing I've seen some campaigns do is that about the midway point, they add a new exclusive reward, so creating some excitement about something new that's being added, or announcing when there's 1 or 2 left of an exclusive item, making your fans excited about and creating a sense of urgency. Again, not asking for money, focusing on there's a new reward, or there's only one house concert reward left, or one private live stream left, that kind of thing. So all those updates are super important, and it's no surprise. Another statistic I found was that campaigns that don't update their supporters, you're really not setting yourself up for success. But obviously the ones that do raise 126% more than if they don't. Keeping your fans updated throughout the entire 30, 40-day campaign is Ariel Hyatt, who runs Cyber PR, has this saying, it's the 3 C's: consistent, compelling content throughout the whole crowdfunding campaign, which is vitally important.
All right. Thank you. Okay, Justine, great question. We'll get to that in just a moment. Yeah. Okay, and then during the campaign, I guess just being nimble, thinking on your feet, just if it's your first one, maybe you don't have a lot of metrics, although Dave's given you some here. Google is your friend. As this is going, though, assess what isn't working, what is. You hopefully have put a lot of planning into this, but that doesn't mean that you can't be dynamic. Ditch an idea if it's not working. Try something else to spice it up, which is also going to be something you're going to do in your post-mortem that we will get to here. So your campaign is wrapped. You hit 100% and more of your funding goal. Congratulations. And I guess we can use some of these for kind of the rolling, ongoing subscription style campaign as well. But here we go. Once things are wrapped up, yes, stay connected with your fans and contributors, not just to tell them things are over, but even in the aftermath of that, whether your project's ongoing or, again, if it was something circumstance-based, look, got a new amp today thanks to the fine folks at local music store and all of you, et cetera, et cetera. Make good on everything you promise. And that pertains mostly to rewards and incentives, delivering on that. But also, if your budget was super detailed, not that you have to go through and address every line item or anything, but just show you were transparent and you made good. Tie up your loose ends. And then here's one, Dave, we'd love to get your input on just once things are done in the past, again, depending on whether your campaign was flexible or the opposite of that, fixed, flexible or fixed, that'll obviously determine kind of what happens at the end with your funds and everything. But as you were hopefully doing during assessing your performance, once this thing is over, go back and nitpick at every possible detail. Was it successful? Could it be more successful? Was it a dud? What can we do instead? So I kind of hogged all the airspace there, but Dave, floor is yours on any of these if there's anything you can add.
No, that's all great stuff. That's exactly right. It's important to celebrate the success and the journey and thank your fans, keeping it super positive regardless of how much money was raised. Like you pointed out, deliver the rewards on time. If there are going to be delays, be super upfront about it and why. And look at that data. When the dust settles, there's gold in that data. So you might have super fans you didn't know about. So pay close attention to the people that were contributing to your crowdfunding campaign, up from $10 through $1,000 pledges. Make sure that you know who these people are and that you thank them all. I've heard of bands that when they're sending out the CDs and the vinyl and the physical rewards, they're writing, you know, personal thank you notes, just making sure that you know that the fans know that you appreciate them and you appreciate their trust. And getting back to Enter the Haggis, Brian Buchanan has this great quote in that blog post he wrote for us. He says, "Your fans don't owe you anything. Make it obvious that you appreciate their trust every chance that you get." So all those little small gestures and the thank yous and just letting them know that you really appreciate them will go a long way into, you know, making your next campaign successful or your subscriptions, fan club successful in the future.
All right. I've got some great questions teed up here. One of which, we might have to workshop a bit. But here we go. Okay. Thanks a ton. And yeah, it's the latest one that comes in. Okay, we'll say that for a sec. So Justine's question about being endorsed by Remo and Sabian, two very well-respected percussion companies. Yeah, we were talking about partnerships to help amplify your campaign. Absolutely. It certainly can't hurt to ask if you've got an artist relations rep at Remo or Sabian. Like, I'm sure they can't have all of their dozens or hundreds of endorsing artists asking them to signal boost this kind of thing. But yeah, give them a call. Come at it. What would it take? You want to access that network. You can produce some content. Feel it out, I'd say. I can't think of a specific example of a company like that, like signal boosting. But yeah, there's no reason they can't or maybe wouldn't outside of a policy. Am I off base on that, Dave? Is there any kind of line you can cross in terms of who you're trying to partner with to help get word out?
No, well, maybe. I guess there's always a line you could cross. Like, I'm trying to think, like, if you didn't get any response from them and you end up just tagging them on every single social post, it might be annoying for them at a certain point. But that's the only thing I can think of. It's obviously a great part of your story, and you should include it whether they're going to help amplify it or not. Like, just obviously being sponsored by those companies is a great thing that not every musician has. So that should definitely be part of your story. And, you know, we get artists who are Benzigo members who ask us to amplify their campaigns, and we can't always do it, but you know, even if it's just a shout out on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, we always try, and companies will generally, if they're working with you, they're going to want to. So I think that's a fabulous idea, and it's something that probably more artists should definitely do in terms of amplification. When I saw that note in the slides, I thought it was a great idea, and if you're in a position to be able to leverage partnerships like that, I think that's awesome.
Love it. Yeah, that one just came off the old dome. Dave, feel free to add to this, but Barry's wondering, would you consider crowdfunding to get a musical on stage? I would say absolutely. You're in great position for that, just in terms of like what your rewards could be. The fact that it's I think that this would be a medium very conducive to that, said from someone that's kind of outside of the theatrical world. But yeah. Any thoughts?
Absolutely. Totally agree. The first thing I thought, I was like, wow, you can get really creative with the incentives and rewards for that. So yeah. Absolutely.
Like character names or
totally. Yeah.
Keep me up for that. No, great question. And another great question, Alex. Thank you for joining us. Most artists in Canada with a dedicated following have more funding opportunities through Factor, the Canada Council. Yeah, we got a great grant system here. Is there a benefit to crowdfunding versus going through the standard funding avenues? I'll let you take this one first, Dave, just in case there's something I don't know, but I am inclined to say they needn't be mutually exclusive unless some of those granting bodies do have a stipulation against crowdfunding on similar projects. But
yeah, that's the only thing I can think of as well. It's a great point. And I don't know. Back in a previous career, I was a grant writer, and I knew a lot more about the Canadian grant system than I do now. But I would say I definitely agree with you, Andrew. Like, it should not be mutually exclusive. I think you can and should do both and use the grants to. I would flip it, and I would focus on the crowdfunding. And really, because it's really, you're engaging your fans. It's not all about the money. It's definitely part of it is about the money. Don't get me wrong, but it's more about engaging with your biggest fans and creating super fans out of the process. And then you can use the grant money to supplement what you raise for crowdfunding, and not the other way around. And the grants obviously are not guaranteed, and it can be difficult to get those, of course. But I would definitely flip that. I would focus on the crowdfunding and engage with your fans. Even if you set a pretty modest goal, if you know you have grant money coming in or whatever, be upfront about that in your budget and explain to your fans. But I would focus on crowdfunding, because that, at the end of the day, if you do it well and you really treat your fans well and give them reason to be excited and contribute, you can rely on that a lot more than you can rely on whether a government grant's going to be accepted or not.
Awesome. Thank you. And Alexandria, April's got some advice in here too, I think from her own experience. Oh yeah, there you go. Oh, that makes total sense. I should have known that, president of Music PEI for a while, that when some granting bodies are reviewing your application, often some of the wisdom is like, if this is something that isn't going to happen, whether or not you get funding, then we probably shouldn't be funding it in the first place. So in fact, I think you might benefit from saying, in addition to this grant, we plan to run a very well executed crowdfunding campaign, and we plan to do this. I think that would just show your entrepreneurship and dedication. So there you go. Thank you very much, April. Dave, is the money from crowdfunding taxable in Canada at least?
Yeah, it's I believe it's considered revenue. Yeah. So that's something you got to factor in. That's, you know what, I'm not an accountant, so I shouldn't be giving this advice. So I would definitely ask your accountant, but I would think that it is considered, especially if you're a solo artist, that's revenue coming in. And so if you're a band, maybe you're set up as a company, and that's still probably taxable revenue, but you're going to expense against it, obviously, with the studio costs and production costs and things like that. But I would definitely ask your own accountant, but I would think that you do have to be aware that that revenue could be taxable.
Okay. Now this one, fairly specific, but hey, we're all here to learn. High tide floats all boats. Robbie, great question here. This is an old school process, but it's the COVID-19 world now. Indeed, good attitude. How can we reframe the key points you are making? Robbie is a children's artist. Kids don't buy music, parents do. He's asking about Bandzoogle specifically, but yeah, maybe any advice on how you can target a crowdfunding campaign towards parents where the reward, the incentive, a lot of the benefit would be for the fans who are children.
Right. Yeah. That's obviously a very specific case. I would think that, again, I'll go back to, to crowdfund, you kind of need to have that crowd already. So I wouldn't embark on a crowdfunding campaign unless you have the parents of the kids who, the kids are fans, or the parents know they're fans of yours, and they're already consuming your music. They're already on your mailing list. They're already, had been going to your shows previously. Yeah, I think the same principles apply. Obviously, if you're trying to reach a new audience and reach other kids who could be fans of your music, that's a trickier question, but that's not really what crowdfunding is. You might make some new fans in the process, but crowdfunding is really focused on your dedicated fans and bringing them along the journey. And once the album is out is when you're really more promoting the music and trying to find those new fans that you can hopefully turn into super fans that will contribute to your next crowdfunding campaign. But I think the same principles apply, but it's an excellent question. And yeah.
And if only because, Robbie, it is a great question. And because you mentioned COVID-19 there too, as a parent now, my wheels are turning here that you could be very successful in like the idea of, I've got a 3-year-old and 5-year-old. I work from home. They're here with me all the time. We can't have a babysitter come in, obviously. We live very far away from our family and friends, and my wife works at the hospital, so she is in every day. So yes, I've got 8 hours, 3 of them they're asleep, but a good 5 hours of young, active kids around trying to do stuff. If someone were to raise money or a crowdfunding campaign and one of the incentives was, say, a 30-minute live stream performance for your kids, there's tons of places you could go with this, but appeal to the parents' concerns via your ability to entertain their kids. You might be able to strike gold in this day and age. My wheels are still turning on that, but
absolutely.
Robbie, I hear something here. That's great. Okay. Thank you, everybody. If there's any additional questions, we'll wrap up here for this evening, but my email address, very easy to find. In fact, I will throw it into the chat again here. And if Dave wants to shout his out, great, but I will happily relay any requests or questions his way. I hit me directly. Otherwise, I mentioned it at the outset, crowdfunding for musicians. And Dave, do I remember right? Was it Laser that wrote this book that you guys had on for a session not long ago?
I don't think so, no. But I definitely know this book. I might even own it, actually.
Okay, there you go. I must be hazy with the memory. It's been a weird few weeks. But yeah, if you've got the notepad downloaded, you can take that link. It's really well priced. And hey, if Jonathan Colton endorses it, I'm down. But no, we've had tons of great feedback on this title. It's been very popular, particularly over the last few weeks. Check it out if you're so inclined. And finally, yeah, another big thank you. Within the next 24 hours, everyone that's registered will get an email with a link to a recording of the session. If you had any AV issues, our apologies, but that'll be a great way to access this. You can share it far and wide. Again, we are reachable, nwcwebinars.com, bandzoogle.com. I'll hand it over to you, Dave, open floor. Anything else you want to let people know about?
No, I think we covered a lot. I just want to thank you for having me and thank everyone for tuning in. I hope it was helpful. I hope you're all safe and healthy and stay that way. And the only thing I would plug is check out the Bandzoogle blog. Tons of resources. We created a whole new category in our blog. You'll see it when you land on the page. It's for COVID-19 resources for musicians. We've put up a ton of free content there to try to help musicians through this crisis. So cheers, everyone. Thanks so much.
Love it. I'll throw it out here. Justine says, Laser, the author of the book we were just promoting, she's doing an online course with Laser rolling out soon called Crush Your Kick Funder. Justine, we're going to shut down here, but if you've got a link to any more information you want to throw in the chat, please do. Again, thank you so much, Dave Cool from Bandzoogle. Appreciate all the kind words. We will share this. Thank you. Love the Pandemic Handbook. Great. Hopefully that's useful. Share it far and wide. Enough for me. Thanks, folks. Stay safe, stay sane, stay productive, keep the great music coming. And we'll be back. Oh, I should say it here. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. You'll be able to sign up as soon as tomorrow morning. But based on our ebook, Pushing Through the Pandemic, our next session is happening just over 2 weeks from now, May 14th. And we're picking up on that, pushing through the pandemic. Going to give you a ton of tips on things you can be doing right now. Casting a wide net, but just want to help everyone stay productive, stay positive, and keep pushing the career forward. There we go. Take care, everyone. We really appreciate it. Back with more in a couple weeks.